What's good, y'all? So in this video, I'm going to be reacting to the most unsettling Airbnb stories by Tuv. I don't know how you say his name, but I've watched his videos before. I've never reacted to them, but I like them. They're very in-depth, very, very eerie most of the time. And yeah, so I'm interested because I'm into the horror and stuff. This is just real, so it's like, dang, you know. But I've stayed in an Airbnb. I stayed in an Airbnb one time, and it won't like nothing was crazy with that experience, but I just started getting like uncomfortable after knowing that people will put like cameras in their house and spy on you. Or there was a movie, like I don't even know what it was called, but it was a horror movie about like somebody giving like an Airbnb to somebody and they double booked people, and the whole time there was like a monster in like the basement or something. Listen. So I don't know. I'm a hotel type of girl. You feel me? It's cool. I feel like that's better anyway. But let's see what's going on with these people that decide to get an Airbnb.
State, and with that comes renting out places if necessary. One of the most popular apps to do just that is AirBNB, which fun fact stands for Air Bed and Breakfast. The company began in 2008 and is a place where the host can rent out a home, room, or even an experience if you want to try something new.
And what's crazy is I said, like, if I become like, I said if I get like rich, like I would do an Airbnb. Like I would just have a second house that I rented out because I feel like that's just like smart, money wise. But I'm trustworthy. I don't want to see what you're doing, to be honest. But I get it because some people want to see what people are doing. So if something happens to their property, they know, you know what, it's too much. Never mind, I don't want Airbnb. It's too much that goes on with it.
But with something that's been in business for about 16 years and revolves around its community, there have been a lot of dangerous events that have occurred. From hosts placing hidden cameras in rooms.
It's in there. If this is an ad, bitch.
From hosts placing hidden cameras in rooms, guests using the rented home for drug use, orgies, and even a makeshift brothel, to even discovering a corpse in the same location where a guest simply thought they were going to relax. Today's video is dedicated to unsettling Airbnb stories. Hey guys, my name is Tuv. I'll be your host for today's video. I'm always the what am I saying? I'm always the host on this channel. Here's the current sub count. If you haven't subscribed,
go crazy. Cause when I used to watch him, he was under a mil. Go the fuck off. Yes, sir. We love to see it. I love to see the grind. I love to see the progression with the mofos.
Worry about that. I'll earn your subscription by the end of this video. Sometimes I wish you guys could smell me through the screen because my cologne game is...
Yeah, see, I already be knowing. I be knowing. So we gonna have to...
Let's get back to the video. Host secretly took over 2,000 guest images. The whole idea behind Airbnbs is to provide guests with more affordable and homier vibes compared to hotels. As a host, or rather the owner of the home or accommodation, you can do a lot towards this and even earn the superhost status if you get continuous positive reviews from guests. 54-year-old Jay Ali had been ranked as a superhost, having provided guests with exceptional...
I'm not trying to say too much, but I don't know, he don't look like... I don't know, the hairline. I got a big forehead, so I'm not trying to say nothing, but I'm just saying something about him don't give me, you're safe with me. You know, it's not giving that, so I don't.
Rural retreats over the years. He had a cabin in the hill country town of Comfort in Texas called Ali's Cielito Lindo Ranch, which was described to have been cozy, quiet, and safe. Now, from what I just said, you'd expect nothing but good vibes from the host, right? Well, no, you're watching a Tuv video, so that's not what's going to happen in this story. On February of 2023, he was charged with 15 counts of invasive visual recording. He had secret cameras constantly recording guests, and he ended up pleading guilty to 6 of them. Apparently, Ali had captured over 2,000 images of guests in their most intimate moments. This included them sleeping, undressing, and even having sex. He literally captured everything. Disgustingly enough, even children weren't spared, counting up to more than 30 of the unknowing.
Get him out of here. I don't even care, bro. What happened to bro? I know he didn't touch nobody. But like the children, I don't play about kids. Oh God, like you start doing weird stuff. or you try to hurt.
Victims. So how did Ali's scheme eventually get discovered? The answer to this takes us back to July of 2021 when a couple from the Midwest, David and his girlfriend, booked a stay at his property. Right from the get-go, they were quite concerned since Ali had suggested it would be a great experience to watch the sunrise from the porch, either in their pajamas or entirely naked. It's pretty normal for hosts to suggest fun activities, but to straight up say, yeah, you guys can be naked at the porch, extremely suspicious from the start. I guess they rubbed it off and continued with their stay. It was, however, when his girlfriend was showering later that David noticed the AC powered adapter was facing the bed. Because of those initial comments from the host and just basic instinct, he took a closer look and his fears were confirmed. Turns out that it was actually a hidden camera that was wired into the wall.
Immediately, you know what's crazy? What if bro was watching the camera right then and it was like, oh shit, they found me out. I have to get them out of here. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's too many. It's too much that's going on out this, like, in the world for me to be comfortable, because they're if you weird enough to put a hidden cameras and watch a little, you feel me, walking around, you will try to get me out of here. And there's nothing you can tell me to think otherwise. I've said this multiple times in different videos that when you go into like a big store, you go in the mall, something like that, at least 10 of them mofos in there with you is weird and or murderous.
Filed a criminal complaint at the Kendall County Sheriff's Office. Just a day after this, the police issued a search warrant on the property as well as on Ali's home, which was nearby. Investigators confiscated at least 6 electronic devices that belonged to Ali, which were later handed to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Investigations were still ongoing when in October of 2021, a new piece of evidence suggested that the hidden camera had actually been set up in the property for at least 9 months before that specific couple had reported it. Crazily, this piece of evidence was an Instagram video that had been recorded in November of 2020, showing what looked like the same AC adapter in the exact same position. This is how the 2,000 plus images I mentioned at the beginning of this case came about, with some sources actually quoting a total of 2,126 image thumbnails. Slowly, as the news spread, more guests who stayed at Ali's property came out with complaints, obviously concerned about their privacy. At least 17 of the victims were being represented by attorneys Roger Bresnahan and Bianca Zuniga Goldwater, who described their clients' experiences to have been like a real-life scary movie. Now, what makes this whole thing even more bizarre is that despite the accusation, Ali had initially claimed to be innocent of the charges and even was looking forward to the hearing. His professed innocence, though, never held water for long because beside the man who initially discovered the hidden camera. Apparently, texts were discovered of Ali accusing David of allegedly placing the camera there himself, and that, quote, he would have to take the necessary measures to protect his family from extortion and fraud, end quote. Anyway, Ali ended up serving time in jail and was eventually released after his 1-year sentence.
1 year? 1 year? What? He said he got to take the necessary measures. What's that mean? Huh? What's that mean? And y'all gave this man 1 year being a weirdo. Ain't that classified as child, you feel me? PPs? Y'all know what the P's. Yeah. He should have got way more than 1 year. Ew.
Earlier this year in February. Also, over and above all of that, at least 13 other people who had stayed at his property, including 2 minors, sued Airbnb in 2022 for privacy violations.
Good.
They won, and 6 months later, Airbnb agreed to a settlement. The company also responded by condemning Ali's actions. Unfortunately for the victims, it seemed like no amount of justice would ever be enough. Some of them sadly reported that they're suffering from long-term trauma, just living with the fear that their images, or even worse, their kids' images, are somewhere floating around in the internet or in some weird people's hard drives. Guests on a drug-induced orgy. We've just seen how guests can have a creepy experience in an Airbnb. Well, the reverse has also happened. Hosts having terrible experiences with guests. The case I have in mind is from April of 2015. A couple, Mark and Star King from Calgary, Canada, rented out their home for the weekend through Airbnb, only to come back to a completely destroyed house.
I was about to say, that looks
completely
disgusting.
Trashed. Stained cushions, garbage, and sticky stuff all over,
Stained
even the ceiling, with flooded toilets, condoms, etc. The police, who obviously had to be involved.
I remember me and my ex, this was like a long ass time ago. So 6 years ago, I think. I was like 20 or 19 maybe. Anyways, we would get in a hotel just to like relax, have a little vacation, whatever. And I remember in the room, it was a nice hotel too. Like, in the room behind the bed was a used C word. And I was like, ew, y'all don't clean everywhere? You got to complain immediately and they'll give you a different room. But I'm just saying, like, I was just like thrown off, like nasty. So if that was all over the Airbnb, I would just leave, because who knows what kind of chemicals they have coming out of their bodies.
They'd rented their home to a bunch of thrill seekers. They'd been led to think that they were hosting 4 adults who were allegedly in town for a wedding. And the offer was so good that as a sacrifice to earn the extra money, they made plans to stay with Mark's parents as soon as they settled on a rate agreement with the renter. Sadly, it didn't take long for all hell to break loose after they handed over the keys that Friday. It was reported that just a few hours later, a 2-day-long party began, which eventually, of course, led to their home being thrashed. Also, apparently, the Kings had been receiving texts from their neighbors throughout the weekend about what was happening. For example, according to them, they were texted about a huge fight that had happened on their lawn and suspicion of property damage. Things had actually been so bad that the police even made several visits throughout the weekend, especially for multiple noise complaints. And for perspective, the host had handed the guests the keys on Friday, and it wasn't until Sunday morning that the police eventually got the revelers to leave. Actually, the previous night on Saturday, the neighbors saw a party bus that brought in almost 100 people to the home that weekend. So that Saturday night, there was a proper party at the premises, and thus the morning after, the police weren't just escorting out one person, no, it was a lot of people. And they said it took a while before they got everyone to leave. The toilets were clogged with they actually wish they had found their house burnt down to ashes instead of the mess that they got. Again, even the police agreed this was one of a kind. They had never seen anything like it. The estimated damages were thought to be between $50,000 to $75,000. Fortunately, investigations soon identified the renter. It's unclear how the criminal investigation went down and the consequences of that, but according to AirBNB, they banned the renter from accessing any of their services in the future.
I don't know, that's not doing enough. Are you going to pay them for that? You know what, I don't want an Airbnb no more. I know I said this in the beginning, but now I really don't want one. That's too much. You feel me? Way too much.
An Airbnb representative assured the Kings that they were working on, quote, quickly reimbursing them under their $1 million host guarantee, which typically covers damages of host property.
Okay. Maybe I want to do
Turned the space into a junkie den. Doubling down on hosts having horrible experience with guests, this Sydney woman, Holly, was deceived into renting out her Roselle apartment in 2016 by a tenant identified as Michelle, who later turned the place into a junkie den. Now, the way it happened was that Michelle lied to Holly that she had a sick child at the Sydney's Children's Hospital in Randwick and desperately needed a place to stay. An arguably really compelling story that led Holly to rent out the place for 10 days while she stayed at her mom's place. Also, apart from genuinely being willing to help out, Holly was a first-time Airbnb user.
But I think that's also the different thing. Like I said, if I was to do it, I would have to have money and a second house. Like, I'm not going to rent out my house. Because you know what? Because if anything happens in there, that's all I'm going to say. But I'm just saying, like, I feel like that's the mistake, is trusting people you do not know to keep your house intact, safe. Yeah, nah, I couldn't do it, to be completely honest.
This means she was really eager to get into the business and, of course, make some money. She particularly had hoped that what she earned from Michelle's stay would go into paying off some credit card debt. There's also the fact that together with her boyfriend, they had, in general, gone out of their way to decorate the apartment with nice furniture, just as a way to give their potential guests the best experience possible. And with Michelle being her first guest, Holly had made sure that the space was professionally cleaned just before she checked in. Unfortunately for Holly, her kindness was met by what she described to have been a, quote, junkie den. When she returned to her apartment, she found that not only had she been robbed, but also that the place was completely trashed. There was rotten fruit smeared on the walls, a cracked pipe in a vase, and several...
Did they say a crack pipe? Oh, okay. Maybe I'm not charging enough. Maybe maybe the wrong crowd coming over. Like, what's
her items missing. That includes cushions, lamps, a speaker, and a hard drive. In addition, there was a mysterious green liquid on a lot of the walls, and her towels were disturbingly covered in blood. The place stank of chemicals. They later found out from the police that this had been either heroin or ice. And it was undeniably evident that trashing the place was Michelle's goal from the start, because the smoke alarm and the ashes spread across her $2,000 rug. The total amount of damages came to about $10,000. Sadly, all that rendered Holly homeless because she didn't have an alternative place to stay while all the damages were being fixed. And to add insult to injury, Holly claimed that Airbnb had not responded to any of her complaints, even as the police got involved.
All she got from them was that they were, I'm not doing no Airbnb
quote,
no more.
Looking into their claim. And her claim, well, justifiably, all she wanted was to be compensated for the cleaning cost and the damages. It was actually not after a massive uproar among online users that Airbnb eventually took some action. Michelle was banned from accessing any Airbnb services in the future, and a spokesman shared that they would be prosecuting her for the damages. Additionally, Airbnb transferred $2,200 to Holly's account to help with the immediate cleanup of the apartment and for her temporary accommodation.
That's not enough.
Now, a funny yet not so funny funny bit here is that, like they do for all their hosts after their guest leaves, Airbnb sent a text to Holly reminding her to rate her house guest, and to her, it felt like this was just one more final insult. Guests ran a pop-up brothel. Before we dive into this one, maybe I should get out of the way that sex work is legal in the UK. Well, except in Northern Ireland, where paying for sex isn't allowed.
That's where that girl said she was sleeping with like 800 people or something like that.
In general, sex work adjacent activities, for example, soliciting for sex
In a
in
day.
brothels, aren't allowed. That can translate to more than one sex worker not being able to live or work from the same house. Now, to get around all that, seeing that we live in a truly digital era, what are being referred to as pop-up brothels are on the rise in the UK. This phenomenon especially got the online community talking back in 2017 after an Airbnb host reported a curious incident in his apartment after he had unknowingly rented it out to, quote, high-profile escorts. The host later contacted the BBC to share his horrible experience. And just like in the BBC piece where they used an alias, that being Greg for him, we'll just go with that name. Now for this particular booking, the guests apparently had asked if they could pay in cash, something which Greg was skeptical about and immediately said no. He refused that offer because it would be going against the Airbnb terms of service, and it also meant Airbnb wouldn't cover anything in case something went wrong. The guests eventually agreed to the proper booking format, and Greg, against his initial judgment, chose to ignore his suspicions about them and allowed them to check in. Nothing seemed odd in their stay, although when it was finally time for them to leave, Greg received a text from them requesting to extend their stay by a few hours because they had a heavy night. That, bundled with his initial suspicion, made him unsettled, and out of curiosity, he went on to look up their names on Google. That's when it became clear that the two were high-profile escorts. Still curious, he dug and got around to even figuring out their rates, and some quick math on the 2 nights they had stayed. He figured it added to at least £2,600 each, £5,200 in total. He couldn't wait anymore, so he just went to the house. What he found was a little strange, to say the least. The apartment smelled like wine and perfume. There were at least 7 or 8 wine bottles, which for 2 nights was quite heavy drinking. He also found used condom wrappers under the bed and said that the bin was literally overflowing with tissues and used condoms. Greg was concerned that his house had been used as a pop-up brothel, meaning that he had indirectly broken the law I just talked about. So he contacted the police. Surprisingly, although they took down all the information he offered, nothing much was done about it. He even tried following up, but nothing much came of it.
So the police over there be doing the same shit? They don't be doing shit. They be getting the people that don't do anything off the streets, but the real criminals, the real mofos, they just be like, He said he attempted to hurt you, but he didn't hurt you. We can't do nothing about it. I'll be like, what?
And even worried for other people who might end up in his shoes. Now, as Greg's story made its rounds online and drew attention, a sex worker by the name of Charlotte shared her own side of the story when it came to preferring temporary housing like Airbnb. Like many other sex workers, she would be forced to move houses whenever neighbors learned of her profession, and the horrible experience of that added to the expensive nature of constantly moving. This is why it seemed preferable to stay in Airbnbs. She'd do so together with a friend or two in order to share the expenses. Charlotte also said there was a safety in numbers because some clients could sometimes be dangerous, and it always helped knowing that there was someone around in such an unfortunate situation. Interestingly, she fully acknowledged that she was breaking the law, with the logic behind it being that she'd rather risk being accused of running a pop-up brothel than risk her own life. Anyway, Greg's story also caught Airbnb's attention, and it didn't take long for them to respond, saying that they had zero tolerance for such behavior. Since then, campaign groups have come out to advocate for legal establishments where sex workers can receive regular clients, which would also promote their safety through security measures like installing CCTVs. Host attacked a guest couple as they slept. This one, like the...
I know you fucking lying. I know you... See... What was that game? I watched like mofos play it. Sean C. I'm Dante Barlisi. Fierce to Fathom. The West Woodbury Wood Forest. Whatever. The one about the Airbnb. And supposedly it was a true story. And I'm like, bro, these mofos be out here crazy as hell.
First case involves a superhost. It happened back in 2018 when a Boston couple who had traveled down to Los Angeles to get away from their busy lives ended up in a nightmare that they never anticipated. The couple, medical residents Jaleesa Jackson, and here's what went down. When they checked into the guest house, everything seemed okay. Their host, a man named JJ, had even left them a kind note and a cold bottle of wine to welcome them. They spent that night happy, and it wasn't until 5:30 in the morning the next day that all the drama started. According to them, they got rudely woken up by loud banging and yelling at the front door. Out of fear, Jaleesa called their host JJ. Strangely, they heard the phone ringing outside the door. That's how they found out it was actually JJ banging on the door. He picked up the call, admitted it was him, and apologized for the quote confusion, though adding that life was too short to give them an explanation. I don't know either. Ironically, he wished them a nice time in LA. For whatever reason, the couple stayed and even enjoyed.
Yeah, I was about to say, y'all gotta start opening your eyes, you know? Even if you have to leave and stay in your car or something, like, as uncomfortable as that is, like, I would rather that than for this crazy JJ, that I would have been out. I'm just being
their
real.
first day at the beach. On their second night, though, at around 2 in the morning, something even crazier happened. A man came crashing in through their bedroom window, throwing broken glass all over the place. Uwandu's instinct was that they were under attack, and he sprang into action, even managing to pin the man down. The man unfortunately managed to escape Uwandu's hold, but luckily, they were able to identify him as JJ. They couldn't let that slide, and so they immediately...
Can I see JJ? Who JJ? What JJ look like?
Contacted the authorities. The police were initially skeptical that the Airbnb host would try and attack their guests, but they eventually came around and swung into action. They even sent in police helicopters and luckily captured JJ, whose excuse was that he had been trying to evict the couple for cleaning charges. It was later discovered that JJ wasn't even allowed to rent out the place in the first place. That's according to an elderly lady who was his landlord at the time. Now, the couple was in no way spending another night at the house, so they just...
How are you gonna break the window and you're not supposed to be renting out anything? Why would you want to keep that low profile? My folks be stupid. I'm just gonna be real. You shouldn't do it in the first place, but if you're going to, at least be smart about it.
Into a nearby Hilton. Sadly, on top of what they had already spent on Airbnb, they ended up paying another $2,300 for their hotel room, parking, and other expenses. Because of this, they contacted Airbnb for compensation, and it took months for them to be reimbursed the full amount of their fees. Beyond that, Jaleesa and Uwandu also asked for $5,000 from the company, but only got half plus free therapy sessions to overcome the trauma. That solution ended up not being so well received, as even celebrities chimed in with disappointment. Actress Gabrielle Union, for example, tweeted saying that whatever happened could have ended way worse than it did, and that Airbnb needs to protect their guests better. Airbnb,
because he could have been a weirdo. Like, I mean, he was, but I'm saying he could have been like, he could have opened the door, you know, just to watch them while he slept, or they slept, and then like really got them up out of here.
B remained adamant though, and only responded by removing JJ from the platform. They said there have been millions of stays on Airbnb overall, and negative experiences are extremely rare occurrences. New Year's banger with over 250 guests. As crazy as it sounds, this next one was a party that took police officers from 5 area departments to shut it down. It happened on the last Saturday of December of 2017, when officers were called to a home in Shelley Drive, Ohio, when you learned that, like any other host on the platform, he had specific rules for his guests, one of them being that no parties were allowed during their stay in the house. The host also had barriers in place to prevent access to some of the other rooms. This house guest, unfortunately, cared less about what his host had to say because, like I pointed out, he hosted a huge party with a turnout of almost 250 people. And still getting crazier, he had apparently advertised this party on Twitter, inviting practically everyone to what he called the quote, New Year's banger. Why? Not really too sure, but maybe for the $5 that he was charging people at the entrance. But where was the owner all along? I mean, we know he was home, but where? Well, trying unsuccessfully to get things under control. He is said to have tried to intervene, but it got out of control as he even was threatened by 5 men at the party. For his safety, he retreated and locked himself in his room, where he then decided to call the police. The Seven Hills police responded, and initially, they had a hard time accessing the house because of snow. Then, when they finally managed to, they said they could hear the music from 100 yards away and saw a lot of people going in and out of the house. They described the house as being so tightly packed in each room that there was no space for someone to even extend their arm. They began trying to usher people out, asking the partygoers to leave, but that only started anti-police comments and shouts. The officers from Seven Hills PD were clearly outnumbered and luckily had called in reinforcements. Almost comically though, even as other officers arrived, there were still more people coming to the party and reportedly turned away at least 50 other vehicles. To effectively break up the party, they had to strategically gain entrance from different parts of the house, with some reports saying that they were met by smells of weed and alcohol, and sights of people throwing up literally where they stood, and also visible heavy damage to the house. And
they were throwing up like just like right there, like that's disgusting. Ew. What was fun about the party?
Or broken doors trying to escape, only causing more damage. I mean, things were so bad that a neighbor whose house was also sadly destroyed that night said that she was fearful for the officer's safety, describing the partygoers as a mob. The man, being unidentified, is said to have faced several serious charges. These include disorderly conduct for unreasonable noise, and hindering movement on public streets, furnishing alcohol to minors, alcohol activities without a permit, and criminal damage. As for the aftermath, the homeowner said everything had been ruined. It's still unclear whether or not he got assistance from Airbnb, having already filed a complaint. They did, however, say the same exact statement I've said before, that there are millions of Airbnb experiences, and this is just a really rare one. They put that out along with a list of tips for hosts to prevent similar occurrences. Host essayed guests after holding them hostage. This one is what was meant to be a fun-filled trip to Madrid turned into a horror story for 19-year-old Jacob Lopez after his Airbnb host held him hostage and took advantage of him. It was reported that early in the evening of the 4th of July of 2015, Jacob's mother, Michaela Giles, received very concerning texts from her son begging for help. Jacob had been staying at an apartment he had booked through Airbnb while in Madrid, and through his numerous texts, his mom found out that his host had been harassing her son. According to Jacob, since they arrived at her apartment from the subway, the host had been pressuring him into submitting to sexual acts. She allegedly kept on kissing him and even took off his pants at one point.
I'm not one of them people that think that men can't, that can't happen to them. Because there are some weird women, and men will do the same thing to men, and women do the same thing to it's all everybody. Just first and foremost, that's why I have skepticism of traveling alone, because I've wanted to do trips by myself, because I just feel like it's easier. Sometimes when you're dependent on other people, they might cancel last minute, and then you feel like, oh, I gotta cancel now, or they don't have money or something, so you just can't really focus on them. But I just I've been thinking about it, but this is the problem, is that there's weirdos everywhere, and people will take advantage of you more if you're by yourself. And then if I'm going somewhere I'm not familiar with, it's just like I'm already vulnerable. So
all of her advances. All that pretty frightening and made worse by the fact that the host had locked him up and was rattling knives in the kitchen to threaten him. His mom said she felt completely helpless, having been so far away from her son back home in Massachusetts. She had one recourse though, contacting Airbnb and asking them to contain the situation. Surprisingly, they weren't very cooperative and only took her around in circles. According to her, the Airbnb representatives completely refused to give her her son's address and also refused to call the police. Instead, they provided her with the Madrid police's number and insisted they could only take action if the police themselves contacted them. When she called the provided number, Michaela said that it took her to a Spanish recording that kept disconnecting her. Frustrated and understandably so, she blew up the Airbnb contacts until all her calls were being directed to voicemail. Now, as his mom was desperately doing all she could on his end, Jacob was frantically trying to find anything that he could use to protect himself. He said at this point he was so scared for his life that he thought the night would either end with his host killing him or him killing her. He couldn't, however, stomach the thought of being a killer and couldn't have lived with someone's blood on his hands.
I understand, it might seem difficult, but you have to do what you got to do. I don't know. I don't really think of those things. I don't think of stuff like that because, you not about to hurt me. That's all I'm going to say.
Been continuously SA'd that entire night. Eventually, he managed to convince his host to let him out by lying to her that he had plans to meet up with his friends who knew where he was staying. Once he was out of the apartment, he immediately left Madrid and headed back home to Massachusetts.
Good,
now regarding the host,
sad.
What we do know for sure is that she was a transgender woman. She did, however, deny all allegations against her and claimed that the sex was consensual. She even accused Jacob of making up the story because he was allegedly transphobic. Regardless, the host later shared that the Madrid police had already visited her apartment and that she expected to be exonerated. Jacob, on the other hand, was left traumatized and wished that he had trusted his instincts from the very beginning when he noticed a few things about the host didn't add up. That's despite the good Airbnb reviews.
What do you mean?
His mom, Michaela, was equally traumatized, but she was really proud of her son for coming out and sharing his experience. The host profile has since been removed from the app's listing, and Airbnb responded by saying that they had learned a lot from Jacob's incident and were working on improving their guest safety measures. Homeowner fined $500,000 after renter's illegal Airbnb. What happens when someone illegally lists your property as an Airbnb without your knowledge? Well, Drew Gurl is a perfect answer to that question. This Miami Beach house owner was facing a fine worth almost $500,000 because his beach house had been listed on the platform. According to Drew, he had used Airbnb in the past, and to his knowledge, it had been years since he was last on the platform. It was thus surprising when he got the first notice from the city of Miami Beach on the 19th of January 2017 for listing a property against the city's zip code guidelines. All he knew was that his property had two long-term tenants, Isabel Burney and Tematope Oladapo, and they weren't from Airbnb, just normal people renting out the place for their own use. And at the time, he was living in Silicon Valley, far enough that he wasn't aware of the day-to-day activities on the property. It soon became clear though that these tenants were subletting the place, despite a clause in their lease that
You know what, I think I'm back to not wanting an Airbnb too much.
forbade them from using the property for transient occupancy. An agent that Drew sent in to investigate advice to their users. It wasn't actually until Drew reached out to a friend that had connections with an Airbnb that he received a somewhat useful response. On the 28th of March, a whole 11 days later, Airbnb finally wrote back to him, this time promising to handle the situation. And to Drew's relief, the company kept their word, and on the 4th of April, the listing was taken down. With that out of the way, he was then ready to deal with the city's $500,000 fine. But then things weren't over just yet. He had barely evicted his tenants when new travelers showed up at the house, 4 days after booking their vacation stay. Drew would then find out that Bernie and Aladopa, his previous tenants, had started their own booking website called Vacayo and quite bizarrely, listed Drew's house on it even after they knew it was taken down from Airbnb. So this meant that the two were still in business. Anyway, it's unclear how he went about getting them to take down the listing from their site, if at all they did, and the two also denied all allegations made against them. Among the concerning bits of this case is that it seems that this kind of thing isn't unheard of. Many other homeowners actually came forward and shared being in similar horrific experiences as Drew. Guests find corpse in garden. About 10 miles from Paris, there's a little known but well-off town called Polyzoo, which in February of 2016 made its way to global media headlines after a rather unsettling Airbnb fiasco that happened there. Guests discovered a body in the garden in the house that they were staying at. The
man at the garden. I deserve it all.
For the weekend, but their stay got cut short when they bumped into a body on Saturday afternoon. Now, to give you perspective on the house, it was located in suburban Paris and was described as a charming 7-bedroom house with a swimming pool and overlooking a forest area. The host
Do you ever get a vibe from a house like, oh, you're haunted? Do you like I don't know. I used to like drive like past houses and be like, this is the one. I don't know. Sometimes when I say stuff, I'm like, bro, nobody else probably has experienced that but me.
Unfenced and simply slopped into the forest. Like the garden just extended into the forest. It was near this end that the group discovered the body of the woman, who police estimated to have been in her early 40s. The body was found laying down, face on the dirt, covered in branches and surrounded with wooden stumps. The woman was dressed but with no shoes and had a ring with a large stone. Interestingly, the police believed the body had been left out there to be found, and so they questioned the renters as well as the family that owned the property. It actually turned out that the family of 7 that had lived there had gone on a short vacation to a different region in France and had intended to return on the following week on Wednesday. Learning of the news, the homeowner was reported to have been pretty shaken by the idea that it could have been his young children that made this gruesome discovery. Anyway, the identity of the woman couldn't be immediately established as her body was too decomposed for autopsy. It was, however, estimated that she had died about a month or more prior. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like. If I earned your subscription...
You earned my subscription, buddy. Tuv. You earned it. But now I feel uncomfortable. And it's 11:30. It's 11:50 at night. Which means you did your job. Thank you. The day that I get rich, there will not be an Airbnb. Okay, too much going on. And like he said, it's a very rare occurrence probably, but I'm not going to find out. We're going to have to figure out a different way to, you feel me? Have some type of financial growth that's like more, separate from what I do in my career. So, but yeah. Unfortunately, some people are traumatized through these experiences, and that's very, sad. My Airbnb experience wasn't terrible. It was luckily owned by like someone that my mom knew. She wasn't friends, but she knew of her. So obviously she still could have been crazy, but it was like a bunch of us in there. So she would have been stupid to like try something. But yeah, I don't know. This is just really unfortunate and sad. Some of these situations, some of the trauma these people have to live with. So anyways, y'all like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think. Have you stayed in an Airbnb? How did that go? Let me know. And I'll see y'all in the next one.